Okay, 10 words. Interesting thing is that a lot of traditions, some use less than 10, some use more than 10. But it still doesn't change the content. So, under grace, modern believers don't need to obey the 10 words or the 10 commandments and Shemot, Exodus. They're just historical laws for the Jews, right? Wrong. On both counts. Yahweh's word, his Torah, is not law, but teaching and instruction. And what it tells me is that he's the same yesterday, the past, today, the present, and tomorrow, the future. Yet the religious out there, including Christendom, judge and condemn rule breakers mercilessly. But they condemn them by their own rules. And the irony of that is that by doing it, they actually break Yahweh's commandments to not judge one another, but to forgive and show mercy. So, no matter which way they try and twist it, they're guilty. First of all, the Aseret HaDibrot, or 10 words, was a Sefer Habrit, or a covenant. And it was given in Exodus to all mankind. The Western world claims a cultural and moral superiority based on what? Democracy? A failed Greek-Roman ideology? Or even on their supposed Judeo-Christian heritage? Well, first of all, Judeo is a Torah-based heritage given to the Jews at Sinai. And as they've rejected them and replaced them, how can they claim it? And even if they do claim it, they're certainly not following it. It's not followed by Christendom and churchianity. Sure, they vaguely picked out a few convenient bits and pieces, and even occasionally followed a couple, like number 6, don't murder, and number 8, don't steal, but only when it suited them, in between their pogroms, and the wholesale slaughter of Jews on the way to the Crusades, the burning alive of synagogues full of families as they marched around them and sang hymns, the Shoah, all the various wars and colonizations and slave trading, etc., when all these religious people civilized the heathen savages. How did they do it? By stealing everything not nailed down, including the land, in every single country that they immorally and illegally appropriated from the local inhabitants. And we're sitting in one of those countries today. And of course, lest we forget how these paragons of virtue hung, tortured, decapitated many thousands of their own populations, and deported even more of their own starving populations for the heinous sin of stealing a loaf of bread or a potato for the term of their natural life, to a little corner of their morally bankrupt empire which was called Australia. These so-called religiously superior beings proceeded to break every single commandment wherever they went, in spite of claiming to uphold them on a daily basis, as they lectured and decimated the so-called ignorant natives in these heathen lands. Matthew 23 describes them in great detail. But of course, all of this is in the past, right? We're enlightened now, we're modern, we're born again and under grace. Really? Today's Jekyll and Hyde rules and laws are based on a superior caste-based society of haves and have-nots. And they follow hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of unspoken man-made rules, traditions and regulations. Including the convenient loopholes that they put aside and reserve just for themselves, for those that they describe as the great and the good. It's funny, I've seen some of these greater good going into Parliament, and most of them aren't great, and they're certainly not good. It's a term they use to define themselves as superior beings. In America, the right to bear arms, otherwise known as weapons of mass destruction, is a far more important democratic right than any savagely blocked and fought against legislation that's desperately needed to halt the slaughter of thousands of their own citizens, including school children, on a daily basis, which has become a media-driven ritual that's spread worldwide. There's no country now where all of these mass suicides, they kill everybody else and then kill themselves. So it's just a way of having having a suicide, but getting your name in the papers. So all of this is the fruit of evolution. The survival of the fittest. My question is, define the fittest. So let's actually examine these davarim, or words. First, he says he brought us all out of the abode of slavery. As Jews, he's talking about Egypt and all of the other places we've been since then. But the believers, he's talking about sin. He brought us out of the slavery of sin and promises to do the same for all who will accept redemption, Jew and Gentile. One new man. But he also says, "You to have no other gods before me." But in order to do this, mankind must accept Yahweh as the only true God, and not mix him up and say, it's all the same person. All paths lead to God. Not to Yahweh, the God of Israel, they don't. Yahweh actually forbade Israel from having any other gods. People have always made gods out of almost anything. I love the one in there where it talks about they'll make a god out of a log of wood, and then a log from the same tree they'll stick on the fire to warm their hands by. There's statues and idols everywhere. But you can also include the quest for material goods and family relationships. In fact, it says in his word that anything that becomes more important than Abba becomes our God. Anything that we put first, no matter what it is, if we put it before him, it becomes our God. In fact, without this first commandment, the other 9 have no meaning. Second, this command does not forbid making copies of created things. What it does is it forbids us making them into idols to be worshipped. It doesn't say we can't make these things, it just says don't bow down and worship them. Third, it says taking Yahweh's name in vain, which can involve far more than misinterpreting or misusing the names by which he's called. Taking Yahweh's name in vain is often carried out by those who claim to represent him, and yet in reality deny his existence and power by their behaviour. As his word says, above all, my brothers, do not swear oaths, not by heaven, or by earth, or by anything else. Let your yes be simply yes, and your no be simply no, so that you won't fall under condemnation. And that's in James 5:12. Now we come to the fourth one, the seventh day. It's actually the longest of the commandments. Of all of the other commandments, this has got the most content. I wonder why. The seventh day Shabbat was created thousands of years before the descendants of Yehudah were called Jews. And during that entire time period, it was never ever called the Jewish Shabbat. Why? Because it was created for the benefit of all mankind. Therefore, it's incorrect to call the Shabbat the Jewish Shabbat. It's not anybody's Shabbat, it's Yahweh's Shabbat. And it's always been Yahweh's day of rest, and it remains unchanged and will continue to remain unchanged. Even most of today's Bible commentaries and then Bible marginal references actually contain the correct Greek translation of the word rest as the keeping of Shabbat. They call it the Sabbath, but the translations are quite clear. The English word rest is translated from the Greek word sabbatismos, which means Shabbat. Therefore, the passage should read, there remains therefore a keeping of the Shabbat for the people of Yahweh. And to make it absolutely clear, Yeshua confirmed that he wasn't changing anything. When he said to them, the Shabbat was made for man, not man for the Shabbat. It's a gift. Without question, both the Torah, the Bible, and secular history record undeniable evidence that the emissaries or apostles and the early Messianic believers observed the seventh-day Shabbat and never ever celebrated the Roman emperor's substituted Sunday, which he created to worship him as the sun god. That's why it's called Sunday. Therefore, it has to be concluded that those who want to follow Yahweh today must also observe his seventh day as instructed by his word to all believers. Fifth, why should children obey their parents? Because honour your father and mother is the first commandment with a promise. Why? Because Yahweh is our Abba, he's our Father, and he's already set the example by promising that if you do, all will go well with you and that you will enjoy long life on the earth. And that's what he says. If you honour your mother and father, you will have long, prosperous, successful life. It doesn't say you have to like them all the time, it just says you have to honour them. It doesn't say you have to like your kids all the time, it just says you have to love them. Two totally different functions. Sixth, no killing. It's obvious. Even the worst savages and the worst places on earth, they've got it all tattooed on their arms. Do not kill me. There is no civilization where they turn around and say, kill me, kill me. Nobody wants to die. And the interesting thing is, Yeshua actually placed the root of killing where it belonged by saying, you belong to your father Satan and you want to carry out your father's desires. From the start, he was a murderer and he never stood by the truth. So often we hear that he's the father of lies, but we miss the fact that it said he was a murderer. There's obviously something we don't know about, apart from the fact that his desire is to destroy all mankind and murder the whole of mankind. But he's not only the father of lies, he's also the father of killing. And it says, because he was a murderer and he never stood by the truth, because there's no truth in him. Whenever he tells a lie, he's speaking in character because he's a liar. Indeed, the inventor of the lie. So it was clearly a sin to not just kill, but to murder long before man was even created. 7. The best defense against adultery is faithfulness and loyalty to your wife and to Ahava. or love. The best defense against adultery is faithfulness and loyalty to your wife and to ahava or love. And to respect your neighbour. 8. Borrowing something with the intention of not returning it is still stealing. People say, I haven't stolen anything. Have you borrowed anything? Have you taken it back yet? This isn't condemnation, it's just showing that sometimes we get so self-righteous, and we shouldn't, because we've all done silly things, we've all done some of these things. The wicked borrows and doesn't repay, but the righteous is generous and gives. Psalm 37:21. It says the wicked borrows and doesn't repay, but the righteous is generous and gives. 9. The English word false in Exodus 20:16 is actually translated from the Hebrew word sheker, which can be translated as untruth or deceitful or deception by lying and the corruption of the truth. Thus a lie is a statement known to be untrue, that is made with the intent to deceive. So no matter how you wrap it up and talk about white lies, black lies, grey lies, pink lies, a lie is a statement that's known to be untrue and that is made with the intent to deceive. And the subtle thing that gets in there, and I've heard it even over the last few days, watching a couple of programs and things like that, is people trying to say, oh no, it would be cruel to tell them the truth. And sometimes it seems like it, but it's even more cruel to tell them a lie. As hard as it is, the truth is always better than a lie. And trying to justify telling the lie by persuading yourself you're being kind to someone has the enemy's paw prints all over it. It doesn't mean you have to shock them and just give it to them between the eyes. You can try and put it in a way that is kind, but you have to tell them the truth. So many children I've heard, and they've gone to their parents and saying, why didn't you tell me the truth? And they'll say, we were trying to spare your feelings, we were trying to be kind to you, we were trying to... And the kids turn around saying, I don't care, you should have told me the truth. Isn't that interesting? Satan introduced lying and deception to man. And as the father of dishonesty, he actively promotes it today. Look at the advertising business, look at the news, look at governments. In fact, Satan's goal is to confuse mankind by telling mixtures of truths, half-truths, and subtle and outright lies. He mixes it all up, a spoonful of sugar. Helps it go down. He doesn't just come out and just tell a flat lie. He mixes it with a bit of truth, and he mixes it with a bit of this and with a bit of that. And as a result, most of humanity today follows the same pattern of deception by mixing truths with untruths to serve their own needs. And finally we come to the 10th word. Yahweh demonstrates that sharing is a way of life and love. Most people measure success by wealth and position and status, whereas he measures success by ahava, by love, by unconditional love. When Abba created Ish, or man, or Adam, person, and Isha, woman, and Hava, life, or Eve, she's known by all of these names but it's the same person, they were given free access for all of their needs. All of their needs were met, such as food, water and shelter. Moreover, they were guaranteed equal access to the Creator. and yet they lacked the character to be content with what they'd been given. Humans have the ability to reason and the free will to choose an act, but most are not satisfied with their fair share of life. In fact, they get very upset if somebody's got more than them, even though they've got enough for what they need. But if somebody's got a bit more than them, that's it, they want it. In fact, they don't just want it, they want more than them. Nobody wants equality. They want to be in control. People say, oh, we want equality. They don't want equality. They just want to be on top and not on the bottom. So if you're not satisfied with your fair share of life, it leads to looking at others and coveting what others have. Remember, Eve began coveting or unlawfully desiring the fruit of a tree. That's how it started. She had everything she could possibly need, but there was one thing that she couldn't have, and so she wanted it. Of all the things she had, she wanted the fruit of a tree that wasn't hers to have. The key to shalom and obedience is contentment. And contentment is the opposite of covetousness. We're never to pray for too little or too much, just to pray for enough. And enough is just another word for contentment. And if you're content, you're not covetous. In Matthew 22, Yeshua says that the whole of Torah is held together by just 2 commandments. So, of course, the religious people, a Torah teacher, set a trap for him and asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which of the mitzvot or commandments is the greatest? So Yeshua said to him, you're to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is similar to it. You are to love your neighbour as yourself. And all of the Torah and the prophets are dependent on these 2 mitzvot. Isn't it interesting? If you fulfill both of those 2 mitzvot, everything's covered. So, what's the result of the making it up as you go along religions? An internationally respected theologian, and I say this was their quote, that he's internationally respected because he gets invited to all the big meetings around the world, has sparked a major controversy by suggesting that Christians use tarot cards to share the gospel with New Agers. New evangelism technique. Professor John Drain says that despite their strong occult links, the cards can be an effective way to get those who read them to consider the claims of Christ. And Drain's actually co-authored a book called Beyond Prediction, The Tarot and Your Spirituality, with 2 Australian Christian leaders, from whom he first learnt of the use of tarot cards in evangelism. And one of these 2 heads a ministry to New Agers. And we won't even get into Chrislam. Rick Warren heads the big thing. There's Chrislam meetings all across America. There's Chrislam meetings all around the world where they basically lump the Torah and the Quran into the same meeting. In fact, YWAM now have a new evangelism technique where they are telling people about Yeshua and then letting them continue to have their Muslim meetings with the same prayers, with everything else like that, but then just learning about Yeshua at the end of it. And saying, eventually, in a few years' time, they might realise that Yeshua's the only one and start to let this stuff drop away. Doesn't work that way. Wineman's doing that. Yep. Am I being harsh or judgmental? No. I'm simply stating reality and simply exposing historical facts, just as Yeshua did to the Pharisees and others. Has exposed the problem to the light. The point is, you expose the problem to the light, people can see for themselves and be set free by the truth. I don't need to set people free, I don't need to persuade people. I just need to shine a light on the truth. And then people can see it for themselves and be set free by the truth. And then they become able to embrace the solution. And the solution is Yeshua HaMashiach. I saw something the other day outside, I think it was a Brethren Chapel, and it got "Life's a Puzzle. Jesus is the answer." And he will become their kinsman redeemer and be part of his body. That's the only way they can break free from the kingdom of darkness, which is based on nothing but smoke and mirrors, a plague of lies, deceit, control and greed, all wrapped up in a shiny package called religion. People think, oh, there's all these evil groups out there. The evil groups out there aren't doing a fraction of the harm that these religious groups are doing by saying that they represent Abba. We must fully embrace the kingdom of light, based only on a solid foundation of truth, morals, free will and self-restraint, enjoying a freely received and freely given relationship with our Abba, our Heavenly Father, who had the first word and will certainly have the last word. So shalom, Torah Shomer, Torah keepers, shalom.